A question. Who here is a 49ers football fan? Good. Well, I went to my very first game at Levi Stadium. And I will say, the 49ers were pretty impressive. However, I am from Kansas City. So, I am a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Don't hold it against me. Football has always held a certain fascination for me. It's not the blocking and the tackling, or even the running. For me, I am mesmerized by the quarterback. Whether you're a sports fan or not, consider what it takes just consider for a moment what it takes to be a quarterback like Kansas City's amazing Patrick Mahomes. He is amazing, you got to admit. As Peter Schwartz writes in his book, The Art of the Long View, and I quote, "I've always marveled at the sight of a great quarterback, dropping back, looking across the field 40 yards away, seeing the opposing lineman closing in on him, and 2 or 3 receivers running downfield among a dozen or so other people. The quarterback picks one of those receivers while he himself is running. He lofts a spiraling pass and drops into the receiver's arms. Essentially, the quarterback has made a prediction about where he and his receiver would be several highly unpredictable moments in the future." Now, all the great quarterbacks of history, Otto Graham, Johnny Unitas, Joe Montana, Tom Brady, they had the exceptional gift of being able to look ahead. In fact, their abilities lay in seeing many, many possible solutions before them, quickly analyzing them, and then plunging ahead without hesitation along their chosen path. Now, not every play is successful, but through trial and error, quarterbacks learn when some options are more desirable than others. The quality such individuals display is not in reading the future. Rather, it is in perfecting what Peter Wack called in a 1985 Harvard Business Review article, the gentle art of reperceiving. He says, quote, "To operate in an uncertain world, people need to be able to reperceive, to question assumptions about the way the world works so they can see the world more clearly." Now, how we do this is by imitating what quarterbacks do on every single play, developing and considering multitude scenarios, possible ways in which our future might be played out. The result of such a process is not an accurate picture of the future, but rather being better equipped to make decisions about our futures. Now, let me offer you 2 specific examples from the world of genetic research and one from the world of business. About 30 years ago, scientists announced that they had discovered a human anti-aging hormone. The drug that they developed appeared to delay and even reverse the aging process in people. Now, the next day, the New York Times published an editorial that said, in effect, hogwash. It isn't possible. What's notable about this editorial is that the same message was presented in another editorial by the New York Times in 1903, laughing at the notion of what they called, quote unquote, a heavier-than-air flying machine, which was, at the time of the editorial, theoretically impossible. 3 months after that editorial appeared, the Wright brothers flew their first airplane at Kitty Hawk. Is this human anti-aging hormone a fountain of youth? 3 decades later, still no one knows for sure. But isn't it at least worth thinking about? If we could live actively and in relative health until we were 120, It would change the way that we approach virtually everything in life. Sound preposterous? So did heavier-than-air flying machines back in 1903. And I don't know about you, but I've flown on a number of those theoretically impossible machines. One more example. In 1972, Shell Oil adopted the notion of reperceiving as a corporate strategy. Today, hanging on the walls of one of their corporate banquet rooms are brightly colored murals of envisioned futures of years gone by, some of which never came to pass, and others which were counterintuitive at the time, but did come true. Amazingly, scenario planning alerted Shell's leadership in advance of some of the most confounding events of our times. The 1973 energy crisis, the fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of Muslim radicalism, and the increasing pressure on companies to address environmental and social concerns. They even created a scenario a long time ago, back in 1973 or 72, in which fossil fuel no longer powered vehicles. A scenario that has come true today. How many of you drove here in your electric cars? They were prepared because they dreamed about their futures, because they were willing to look down that field to perceive what might be and what our responses could be to those realities. We are in the midst of extraordinary times. No one ever imagined all that our Beth Am community has done and built would be turned upside down as it has been for the last 5 years. It's been 5 years of transition and turmoil for this community. No one ever imagined it. But what if we had? What if we had disaster planning scenarios like Shell in our proverbial back pockets when the pandemic hit 4 years ago? What if we had imagined how we might respond to rabbinic turnover or rabbinic turmoil? How might our community be different today? As we've heard, we are in the Hebrew month of Elul, the month before Rosh Hashanah. It's that moment in time when we were asked to take a hard look at ourselves, to pause, to question assumptions about ourselves and our lives, and even dare to dream what a new future might look like, to prepare ourselves for those eventualities that we can't really totally anticipate. Elul leads into Rosh Hashanah, and that's a time to make ourselves and the world a better place. This congregation is at such a moment. We've experienced some really big changes over the last half-decade. We now have the opportunity and obligation to pause and to ask some questions. Where are we going as a congregation? What is our future? How shall we re-perceive our coming days? Now, over the last 2 months, I've told you, I've listened carefully to many, many stories. How you understand your congregation's past, how you understand our present, and what you are thinking about for our future. I've heard about glory days and how you loved your previous rabbis and how you didn't love your previous rabbis. I've heard a lot. But you know what I've learned from all of it? That there's a passion for this congregation and passion for the possibilities of the future. The time is ripe to be like a quarterback and begin to envision what that direction might be like. Not just one direction, but multiple ones. Just like multiple receivers that a quarterback spies as he prepares to throw that ball into the air. But, and this is an important caveat, Great quarterbacks don't just happen. They have to work at it. They have to lean into their strengths and compensate and correct for their weaknesses. They need to be brutally honest with themselves in order to be the leader and performer that they want to be on the field. We find ourselves in this month of Elul. Now is the time to begin the process of reperceiving. But to do so requires us to be like any good quarterback. We are called to look honestly at ourselves, to evaluate who we are, why we are, what our strengths are, and what our weaknesses might be. So let me suggest that we take the rest of Elul, 20 more days, and ask 3 questions. Question number 1, who am I? Who am I? 2, how can my Jewish, my life journey have meaning? And 3, what do I need to do? What can I do to make that future into a reality? Now, whether we're 30 or 60 or 90, these 3 questions apply to all of us. Every one of us changes each and every day. And we need to evaluate where we are on our life journeys and imagine and plan and strive. If we don't, we'll be like the quarterback who, when frozen by indecision, guess what happens? He gets sacked. So those are our personal questions for the next 20 days. Who am I? How can my life journey have meaning? And what do I need to do to make that future into a reality? For the congregation, we're going to ask us to do the same thing. Now, some of you have heard me talk about a process called shared visioning. Our work will be foundational, understanding who we are, what it is that Beth Am does, and how it does it. Together, we will uncover our shared Jewish identity, our shared Jewish purpose, our shared Jewish journey. Along the way, we'll also imagine and dream. Now, perhaps none of our imaginings and hopes or dreams may prove to be any part of our future, but all will permit Beth Am to step boldly into this uncertain world. For you, will have many scenarios in your back pocket, different possible paths Beth Am might take to be the best place of caring, sharing, learning, and praying that each of you cherishes. And you will do that with a new settled rabbi. Together, you and I and our staff and our clergy can do this. We can understand who we are and be able to perceive a new future. Now, Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City's quarterback, once said the following: until you get there, you never know what to expect. Till you get there, you never know what to expect. We have been offered the opportunity, you and I, to be partners this year in the process of Tikkun Olam, of healing the brokenness that exists in our community. As Mahomes reminds us, we don't know exactly what to expect for the coming year, but may we spend it together doing the hard work of evaluating and reperceiving our own lives and reperceiving the life of our community. Only when we have, working in partnership with each other, will we know that we have gotten there. And may there, wherever that might be filled with new possibilities and a bright future for us as individuals and for us as a community. May this be God's, but also our will. Shabbat Shalom.